This Sunday, I have another track day at NJMP Lightning. And Lightning is known for having two big heavy braking zones, beginning turn 1 and turn 7. If you're going fast enough, you will be braking really hard. And I actually haven't swapped the rotors at all. The rotors that are on the car are still the OEM rotors, and I believe that it's gone past its minimum thickness. We could check again with the calipers. So this is actually a perfect opportunity for me to install the GiroDisc rotors and some EBC RPX racing pads that I've had in my basement for the longest time, along with some GiroDisc front rotors. We have some EBC RPX front and rear racing pads, some Motorsport hardware studs just to make life easier, and a pair of Alpha N style brake dust shields. And the whole purpose of all these upgrades is so the brakes last longer and stays cooler. And these Motorsport hardware stud kit just to make life easier when I'm constantly taking the wheels on and off the car. I currently use a Keys wheel hanger stud, and it's really convenient, but you know, having to use the racing studs, the stud kits itself, means I don't need to swap different screws, wheel bolts when I'm using spacers, or when I'm not using spacers. They can all go on, which could save a lot of the guessing game and some hassle. So let's get started. I said that the OEM brakes are more than good enough for the track. So why would anyone spend $1,300 on aftermarket brake rotors like the GiroDisc? And the biggest reason is cooling. So you can see how dense the cooling vanes are for these GiroDisc rotors, and then compare them to the stock ones. They're present, but they're not as dense. So in theory, the denser the cooling vanes, the more air it could push out. And the cooler the brakes, the longer the pads will last and won't overheat and become spongy. And to assist with that, we have the brake dust shield. These cover the back of the rotors, and they work fine. Air is supposed to go in through the middle into the rotors, and then the vanes shoot them out. But you can do a little bit better. So these work by channeling cool air into this duct right here. So cool air goes in into the duct directly into the rotors. So in theory, they should help with cooling just a little bit more. These are AliExpress knockoffs of the Alpha N versions. A pair of these, $300. Alpha N ones, $1,000. Also dry carbon. You're never gonna see it once it's installed anyway. And the whole purpose of it is just to channel air. If it channels air, you never see it and it works. I don't see the reason to spend $700+, but geez, their own. The stock rotor, caliper, pads, completely fine for a track. The only reason why I'm upgrading the rotors from the OE to GiroDisc is because I can't find any in stock. I'm looking for rotors from like FCP Euro, ECS Tuning, and they offer it, but it's just this back order forever now. But if you guys could find it on these sites, we'll offer a lifetime replacement. Do not even hesitate, get it from there, because the rotors are not the component that's holding you back. It's probably the brake pads, if anything, and maybe fluids. So always maybe the fluids too. So first thing first, we got to take these calipers off, and there are two 14s we have to take off. these nuts that hold on the front calipers, they should be one-time use only, but I've reused them. As long as I torque them to spec, I feel comfortable with it. You should know that in theory these are one-time use onlys because the threads might stretch. So do with that as you wish, or whatever you feel comfortable with. But before you remove the calipers, now is probably the time to take out these push pins, these guiding pins, while it's still on the caliper. And with these pins out, try sliding off. Although something to keep in mind, driver's side, there is a brake pad wear sensor that you should probably remove before take off the something like that. Pop it off. Don't drop it. You can take out the old pads. And since we're gonna replace the rotors, we'll hang the caliper off to the side. Just make sure you don't let it dangle by just the brake. The brake fluid line, because that's how you put unnecessary stress on it and cause it to leak. If we were to measure the rotors, I believe the minimum thickness for these should be like around 34 millimeters. And if you were to measure right now, parts of it's at 34 already. So, and there's a little bit of a lip developing, which is normal. But since I already have the GiroDisc, I'll probably replace these OEM ones. First step first, to remove these rotors, we get to see this size 5 Allen key. And crack. Oop. What should I do? Sure you're turning in the right direction. After you see. Crack them like that. These screws are relatively cheap, so I would definitely consider replacing these every time you swap rotors. So I'm gonna go on to the next one.
One eternity later.
That screw took forever to extract out. Was stripped, it went in at an angle, but finally got that out. So, after removing those two set screws, we just simply remove the OEM rotor. And the next step is to remove the stock dust shield. These are just held on by 10 mils. We install the back plate, this dust shield. Make sure when we put this on, we have to make sure like the channel right here is facing the brake duct. This duct should shoot air directly into this ducting right here and into the rotor. At least this should in theory help cool the rotors better. Alright, reuse the 10 mils that was originally there. And if you guys are installing something similar to this, you have to keep in mind that this isn't the OEM metal one. Carbon fiber is very similar to like plastic, so you definitely do not want to over tighten it, because if you do, it will crack. Just snug is fine. And that's that. Next thing, the rotors. I don't have a wire brush, but if you do, you can clean this off. Everything looks pretty clean to me, so I'll just go and mount the rotors on. Alright, there. The thing with these rotors is that they're directional. These like slots on these GiroDiscs should be facing forward towards the rotation should be towards the front. This way, this cooling vane, they don't actually scoop air in, they actually eject air out. So, something to keep in mind. Make sure you get the direction correct, or else the cooling performance will be drastically worse. Since I stripped those set screws, I got brand new screws. They only take 2, so, and they're really relatively cheap, so I'll definitely recommend you replace them every time you swap rotors. And they are a 5mm Allen, so tighten those on like that. Something to keep in mind, these set screws, the only purpose of these screws are to keep the rotor on the hub. So they just need to be snug. You don't need to torque it tight at all. Most of the load on these brakes will be onto like these little studs connected to the hub. So this just snug, and that's it. No more than that. Next step, it will be to clean these calipers. Hit it with a generous amount of brake clean. Key points to attack are around the pistons and these channels where the new pads would be sat into. While we have the calipers off, before we mount the new pads on, we want to make sure these pistons are compressed all the way in. So these look like they could be compressed a little bit more. So to do that, it's nice to have a set of old pads. These are the OEM pads that came with the car that I took off a while ago. But because they're used really, and they're like a third left, they're thin enough where we could put them in and use a tool like this. This is the caliper spreading tool. So especially for front calipers, this is not the tool you want to use for rear caliper. There's a different one, but for the fronts, this is what you want to use. And pretty much all you do is put it between these pads and crank it, and it will exert force on both sides and spread the pads and push in the pistons. And the reason I use old pads and not the new pads is because I can scratch up the old pads and not feel bad about it. And the new pads probably won't fit. That's probably the big reason. So then we'll crank it like that, and you'll see that the pistons are being compressed from both sides. So perfect. Loosen it. Move this tool. Remove the old pads. Hit it again. Brake clean. And we can work on prepping the pads. So these are EBC's RPX pads. They are supposed to be track focused. Technically not road legal, but they're fine. And definitely should be able to withstand temperatures much higher than the EBC blues that I was previously running. So hopefully these can last longer, provide a better bite, and not burn up. Prepping them is simple enough. Apply some brake lube to the back. So there's going to be 3 pistons on each side that's compressing on it. So on the place of contact, we just got to make sure we apply a little bit of lube, not too much. Some in the holes for the pins, the guiding pins, and specifically some to the edge. This is where it's going to slide in the caliper, and if you don't want your pads to get stuck, make sure this part is properly lubed up. Same with the other side. And then with both sides done, we just gotta take the pad and insert it into the caliper, like so. Make sure it's not stuck or anything. Should be fine, like so. Alright, put the other side on. Perfect. And now with the pads in the caliper, we could then proceed to reinstall the caliper. I should take off the hook and press, line up the caliper onto the bolts and slide it right on. If you compress the caliper beforehand properly, this should slide right on. If you didn't, the first time I ever did this, I had to like wiggle along, and you're gonna end up damaging the pads or the rotor. So make sure you compress all the pistons down before you reinstall the calipers. These are brand new bolts for the calipers. Like I said, they should be one-time use. I've used them I've taken them on and off multiple times for the year, because I've gone through 2 sets of pads last season and they were fine. Just make sure they're torqued to spec, but in theory they should be one-time use, so do what makes you comfortable. And brand new nuts should be torqued to 95 Newton meters. Next, we have to clean off these guide pins. Just hit it with some quick brake clean. And I have to insert it. Lift up the pads a little. And it'll go right through, like so. Lift the pads a little. Like that. Take a little mallet, hit it in from the back until it fully sits. It should be smooth on the back. Yep, perfectly smooth. Same thing with the bottom guiding pin. And that's that. But keep in mind, since this is the driver's side and also it applies to the rear passenger's side, there is a brake wear warning sensor here. But because these are race pads, I don't think there's actually a groove for these. So what that means is just gotta be extra careful. Keep an eye on your brakes, make sure it doesn't wear past a certain point. And with the sensor, we can just zip tie it. Just have to make sure to zip tie it out the way so it won't be caught on other stuff. And with that, we have new rotors and new pads on the brakes, as well as the new brake dust shield. So last thing you need to do in the front is to install the new studs. And the installation is pretty straightforward. With the stud here, just apply a little bit of Loctite along the threads on the short end. There's one side with a long section of threads, and there's a short section. Put some Loctite on the short section, some blue Loctite, and we'll just thread it into where the wheel bolts will normally go. Alright, so to tighten these down, this will be a 5mm Allen, and according to the instructions, they should be tightened to 25 foot-pounds. And as you go and tighten, you'll notice that up to a certain point, the rotors will start spinning. So, little trick would be to grab a wrench, put it like this, or in this case, the other way. But then you'll hold it until you can tighten it to 25. Perfect. I'll do it to all 5. We'll do a once-over inspection, making everything is good. Spinning. Pins are in and seated. There's proper tension being applied. Bolts are torqued. And yeah, that should be it. Don't actually torque them down. So it's just lightly on, and we'll have to torque all the wheels to spec afterwards. Now we're moving on to the rears. And compared to the fronts, the rears are really simple. The most tricky part is honestly putting the rear brakes into service mode. So it will activate the motor to completely retract the parking brakes. So you could then fully compress the brakes and reset everything. And you could, in theory, use Bimmerlink, but I have very mixed results with that. I personally like using Pro Tools, but Pro Tools, you just gotta have an Android phone. So I have a spare Android phone connected to my MHD dongle. Just connect to the car, put it in a diagnostic mode, connect to the car. Let's see, it's connecting. And just go down to, I'm not sure, I apologize if it's not focusing, but go down to stability control. There should be 2 of them. For me, it's the second one, but just go through either one of them, check controls, and then you should see an automatic hold brake section. Top one says activate installation mode. Click that. And you should hear the parking brakes automatically retracting. That's all you need to do. And then the phone there, turn off the car, and we could then go to the rear and just swap the pads. Rear rotors should stay the same, although I would recommend every time you change the pads, just go use a caliper to measure the rear rotors, just to make sure it's still within spec. The minimum thickness for the rear rotors is 22.4 millimeters. That's the minimum thickness that BMW will still replace the pads for you, and you can still use one more cycle of pads. So if it's at like 22.5, 22.49, it's okay. It's still good. But the moment it's around like 21.8, 20.9, 22.0, may want to consider replacing them. BMW's OEM rotors are plenty enough for the track. Its only biggest use case on track is just stability control. So if you drive with DSC fully off, you should be fine. It shouldn't really wear that quick. Go through like 2 front rotors before you even go through a rear rotor. But if you're like me and you're scared and you keep DSC fully on or in MDM mode, then it will definitely wear faster, but it's probably the pads wear faster way before the rotors. And a quick tip, make sure you have all the tools that you need around you before you start working on it, just so everything's in. When you have the brake caliper off, you're not trying to hold in one hand and struggling to reach for tools, etc. If everything's around you, surrounded you in like an arm's reach, life would be so much easier. And if you install studs, this wouldn't happen. It would just stay on there perfectly. Save yourself a lot of headache. So first thing first, we had to remove these 2 caliper guide bolts out. And should probably use a 13. Yeah, 13. Just to break it loose first. And you notice that there's going to be a nut in the middle. So you need to somehow hold this nut tight to fully remove it, or else it will just spin along with it. See right here? So you should get like a wrench or something, or if you're lazy like me, a vice grip, and just tighten it around there. Perfect. And just loosen this. Before you fully take off the top bolt, I recommend you crack the lower bolt as well, just so, because if you take this out and then you go work on the bottom bolt, this assembly will try to swing out. So less so an issue on the driver's side, more so an issue on the passenger side. So now that the bottom one is cracked, just break this apart. And these, in theory, should be a one-time use bolt. They come with like pre-applied thread lock on it. Relatively cheap. You can get them on FCP Euro, but I've reused them a few times. I replaced them. This is my first a year since I've done a rear brake service, so I'm probably going to replace them this time, but you should replace them every single time. So keep that in mind. Do what makes you comfortable. Something to keep in mind on the passenger side rears, there will be a brake wear sensor that you need to pull out from the innermost brake pad. Since we're working on the driver's side, there's no sensors to worry about, so then we could just slide the caliper off the rotor. And that's it. We still have the brake pads on here, so you could just gently slide these pads out. There's little guiding slots on the top and bottom, so just get one out and then you can wiggle the other one out. These are like half done, but time to replace them anyway. Same thing with the inside one. There's actually a lot of material left on the inside pad. And while we're working on replacing the pads, you could hang these calipers on the rear control arm over here. I think this is like a thrust arm or something. But you can hang on the arm. Just make sure it's not putting any tension on the actual brake line itself. You just hang it on the arm, and while we're working on replacing the pads. Before we start, we should always clean these channels, these guiding channels. So hit it with some brake cleaner. And then coming over, we're gonna prep the pads for install. We have 2 rear pads. Doesn't matter, they're the same inside and out, left and right. So to prep these, all we need is to apply some lube. Don't do too much, but just some in the middle. That's where it's going to contact the caliper. And most importantly, it's these side channels. It's going to be sliding in and out of the guides. So these notches should be lubed up properly so it doesn't get stuck and cause uneven wear. So yeah, that should be fine. And after it's lubed up, we could then slide it into the channels. Probably just get one side in, and then the other side will just go in like so. And same thing with the fronts. Slide one notch in first, and then you could then move to slide the other notch in. It's that easy. Next step is to move on to prepping the caliper. Inspect the seals, make sure there's no leaks. Everything's sitting okay. And before we compress the calipers, just hit it with some brake clean around the seals. That should be fine. And then, unlike the fronts, there's a different style of caliper compressing tool we need for the rears. Pretty much it lines up like so. Okay, so pretty much it's something like this. You line up on the notch, line up some compression thingy in the middle to the brake caliper piston, and compress all the way in like so. And as you can see, it's compressed all the way in. And this wouldn't be possible unless you activate the parking brake assembly mode or installation mode on Pro Tools, because if you don't, even though you release the parking brakes, it doesn't go all the way in. It still hovers out a little bit because it remembers the location of where your brakes were last. And with that out the way, we could then slide the calipers back onto the pads, push down these what is these guide pins, compress these rubber grommets a little, compress it a little so it can slide on. Same thing with top and bottom. And grab some new bolts. So we got, these are OEM bolts. There's thread lock pre-applied. So just apply these on. Just hand tighten them a little bit. Same thing for the bottoms. And then go in with the vice grips to grip onto it and tighten these. These should be tightened to 35 Newton meters. And that's it for replacing the rear pads. And now all that's left is to install the rear stud kit. And installation method is the exact same compared to the front. And that's it. And if you want to check the minimum thickness for your rear rotors, you can see it's inscribed onto here, minimum TH 22.4 millimeters. So just whip out a caliper, zero it, and measure along various locations. See, I'm reading 23.6, 23.03, 23.09, 23.09. The rear calipers still have quite some life on them. And once these wear that down, if I could buy OEM or OE replacements for these by, I believe it's SCH or SWH, I would. They're significantly cheaper than other rotors by, for example, GiroDisc, and they do just fine for the track. There's no reason to spend too much on it, and if you buy from FCP Euro, once these wear away, you could just bring and exchange them for brand new ones. So that's how you save money. This is on the lowest torque setting, just to prevent the nuts from being over torqued. And that's it for rear brakes and studs. And last thing before we set the car down is we have to go on Pro Tools. Alright, so same thing as putting it into service mode. We have to go find a stability control module, control, and then we use the first option, activate installation mode. Now we have to go and click deactivate assembly mode. And then you'll hear the parking brakes re-engage, go all the way in, and then measure, and then back out a little bit. And that's how to take out our service mode in the rear. Lastly, we just gotta tighten the lug nuts to 105 foot-pounds. And before you can actually drive these new pads and rotors on track, it's recommended that you, I lied, it's not recommended, you definitely should bed in the pads and rotors. So a reason why I chose the RPX is because it has a relatively simple bedding process. All I need to do is a series of 90 to 20 stops, let it cool off a little bit between the runs, just do 3 to 5 of them, I believe. There's detailed instructions on EBC's website. Just all you need to do is follow along with it and just let it cool overnight, and that's really it. If you're too lazy to do that, you could even do some 80% laps on track, but you gotta give it an hour or so to cool. So always make sure you bed in the pads before you push them to 100%, just so the pads and rotors can mate and produce like the optimal amount of friction and contact. And before you drive the car, after doing something like this, make sure you press the brakes a lot before you drive off, just in case there's something in the system. We did compress all the calipers, so make sure you press the brakes a lot before you drive off. And that's pretty much the brake service done for the car. It's ready for the track. So to go over what we did front dust shield, rotor and pads, as well as rear pads. and a set of stud conversion kit for all 4 wheels. And that's it. I hope you guys find this video helpful. If I messed anything up or said the wrong torque spec off the top of my mind, please correct me down in the comments below. I'll try to highlight whatever comment, just so whoever does follow this, they get stuff right. And thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.